Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Omari Wooden.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, I apologize. Clearly, I was excited to get to today's topic. But again, good afternoon, everyone. As stated, my name is Omari Wooden with the U.S. Census Bureau, and I'd like to welcome everyone listening to today's webinar, The Tale of Two First Looks. You may have joined this webinar today wondering what exactly a first look is, and then what are the tales that we're talking about. Well, I'm glad that you stopped by to find out. This webinar was created to highlight tools and resources for businesses looking to possibly open a new business or expand their existing businesses by learning about their industry. And I will be your host for the next hour. Please be aware that after our speakers have completed their presentations, we'll open the webinar up for question and answer. Also, we will be using the question and answer feature to receive your questions. So at the bottom right part of your screen, you're going to see three dots. Once you click on those three dots, you'll have the option to ask your question. Lastly, keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available at a future date. So if any of you or your colleagues didn't get a chance to listen, you can always listen again in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm joined by Patrice Hall, the branch chief of the Business Owners Branch in the Economic Reimbursable Surveys Division, and Tristan St. Onge, the Chief of the Information and Business Services Branch in the Economy-Wide Statistics Division. I appreciate you both for your participation and look forward to an engaging dialogue. So let's dive right into it. Patrice, welcome. First question I'd like to ask is, can you please enlighten those of us who are not aware, what exactly is a first look?
Good afternoon, Amari, and everyone joining today, and thanks for having me here. I'd be happy to explain the concept of a census first look. Essentially, a first look is a glimpse into new data points that were recently collected by the Census Bureau. Often the data are preliminary and are provided at a summarized level, and it's a really great opportunity for the Census Bureau to provide timely and relevant data to our user community. As we take additional time to further evaluate the data recently collected, we will follow up with more final and detailed data for our users at a later date.
Okay, that's good. So interesting. Thank you for that explanation. So a first look is essentially a preview or a sneak peek to like what's to come, almost like a movie trailer, so to speak. So that makes sense. Tristan, anything you would like to add from your perspective?
No, I think Patrice summed it up pretty well. And since we have just two first looks being released at the same time, it also gives us this opportunity to compare and contrast.
Good. So on that note, let's speak to your first look first, Tristan. So most people are familiar with the population census that is conducted every 10 years. There may be some who are not as familiar with the economic census. Can you give us some background on the economic census and how often it's collected?
Absolutely. And believe it or not, the Census Bureau does more than count people, a lot more.
Right.
So the economic census is the US government's official measure of employer businesses in the United States. And unlike the ABS, which is a survey of specific businesses, this is a census of businesses and it's conducted every 5 years. It also provides the most comprehensive business and economic data available at the national, state, and even local geographic levels. And it also serves as a benchmark for many current economic measures, such as the GDP or the gross domestic product and the producer price index.
Okay. So you mentioned it's a census of employer businesses. How many businesses are involved in the econ census? The population covers the entire population. So how is the collection handled for businesses?
It's a good question. There's approximately 8 million employer businesses in scope for the economic census.
Wow.
And we ask about 4.2 million of these businesses to respond directly to us. For the remaining 3.8 approximately, which are mostly smaller businesses, we end up utilizing administrative records to reduce their burden. Um, we began collecting data in March of 2023, and that collection only ended about 3 months ago in November.
Oh.
But by implementing new efficiencies, we've been able to uh, have more effective data review, which contributed greatly in our ability to produce these first look figures earlier than we have in the past.
That's good. It's good. So you talk about data collection, but what about data usage? Like who uses this data?
Right.
What are organizations using the data for?
Yeah, we have a wide variety of people and organizations that use these data. You can see on the screen, Congress, for one, uses these data for making informed policy decisions. The same goes for federal agencies, state and local governments, trade associations use these data, researchers, and even individual businesses can use the data for things like uh, analyzing market share, uh, making decisions on investment, expansion, maybe even product development or even business plans.
Okay, so the economic census is conducted every 5 years, and the collection phase ended last year. Since we're talking about the first look, what was released during the first look, which I believe was on January 25th,
Yep.
and what can we expect as far as upcoming milestones?
As informative as the first look is, it's really just a small sliver of what's to come. But the first look provides preliminary general statistics for the US at a broad industry level. This is the 2 to 3 digit NAICS level, and it's provided for almost every sector you can think of. Sector 11 is agriculture. This is new, by the way, to the economic census for 2022. But we also cover mining, utilities, construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, retail trade, as well as about a dozen additional sectors that we classify as services.
So let me interrupt you there just to make sure that we
Sure.
may have some listeners that may not be familiar with NAICS, again,
Yep.
acronyms. Can you explain NAICS to our attendees, to those that are listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So NAICS stands for the North American Industry Classification System, and this is the standard used by federal statistical agencies in classifying businesses for the purposes of collecting, analyzing, and publishing statistical data. So, for example, NAICS 6.2, that refers to the healthcare and social assistance sector, while NAICS 622 is a subsector of NAICS 62 and applies to companies classified as hospitals. So uh, each additional digit is another level of granularity on that NAICS code, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's perfect. I know this is
Mhm.
one of the common questions that we get, and I wouldn't be surprised if you just saved someone from typing that question into the chat. So appreciate that. Since we just released broader industry level statistics for the US as a whole, could you explain what is covered in those broader industry level statistics?
Yes. So those broader level statistics categories, uh, as you can see on the screen, they include number of firms, number of establishments, sales value of shipments or revenue, annual payroll, first quarter payroll, and number of employees. So all those data were released for the sector and subsector NAICS levels as part of the first look release.
Are there any highlights from that data you'd want to share?
I very briefly mentioned it earlier, but I want to note it again that we are excited to be publishing estimates on a subsector that, believe it or not, has not been measured in decades. Industry coverage was expanded to capture businesses in subsector 115. This is support activities for agriculture and forestry. This is being measured for the first time since being dropped from the Census of Agriculture in the 1970s. So it's been a while. Um, I'll also highlight that across all the sectors we published, that in 2022, the number of establishments with paid employees increased to just over 8 million, up from 7.6 million in 2017 and 7.1 million in 2012. These establishments employ about 140 million employees with an annual payroll of $8.6 trillion. And their sales value of shipments or revenue totaled over $50.3 trillion. That's a lot of money if you need any
That's
clarification there.
that's serious. So, yeah, thank you for highlighting that significant growth over the last 5 years, and then also what's new for First Look. So, when can we learn even more from the economic census? Like, what's next?
Yeah. So there's a bit of a gap between the first look and our next planned release, which is the Geographic Area Series, or GAS, as we call it. Um, we're doing something different this economic census. Instead of releasing the GAS on a flow basis, as was done in the past, the entire series is going to be released at one time. And that's going to be in March of 2025.
Wow.
Um,
Ah,
Yeah, the gas release it provides general statistics for the US, states, and other smaller geographies at a detailed industry level. So this is at the 2 to 8 digit NAICS levels, which is considerably more detailed than the first look release. And this is for all of the same sectors.
absolutely, absolutely. So this actually reminds me of the state coin campaign from the 2017 economic census.
Mhm.
I remember different coins being released with fun facts as the data for the state was being
Mhm.
released. I also recall we had an interactive map that was updated as different state data became available. So
Yeah.
now you're saying all of the state data will be available at once, March 2025, and you don't have to wait for a particular state to be released. That's what you're saying?
You have a good memory on that coin campaign, but yes, uh, yeah, this is a major change from previous releases, and it's one of the efficiencies that we want to highlight for this economic census. Um, our releases after that, after the gas series, are the comparative and bridge statistics and the establishment and firm size statistics. Those are both planned for June 2025. And beyond that, we have product statistics and miscellaneous statistics, which uh, each of them provides details unique to select sectors. And then finally, I'll quickly mention that our island area series will start being released this June, with the final island released in December, which should be Puerto Rico. So some good information coming.
Awesome. So much content that
Mhm.
still hasn't even been released as it relates to
Yeah,
the geographic area series. Also impressive to see all the hard work to release this data earlier than was in the past. So, Tristan, thank you for that overview. Appreciate it.
sure.
Now, Patrice, switching gears to the annual business survey, or ABS, as we often call it. Reading into the title, I obviously assume it's safe to say this is a survey that's conducted each year on an annual basis. I can understand a first look for data that's being released every 5 years, like the economic census, but it seems like it could be challenging for an annual survey. But I guess we'll get into that. So, as a background, what is the ABS?
So, first of all, that's a safe assumption, Amari, followed by an excellent question. The ABS is a survey of employer businesses that the Census Bureau conducts annually. The survey is sponsored by the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics, and the purpose is to measure economic and demographic characteristics of employer businesses by the sex, ethnicity, race, and veteran status of the owners on a frequent basis.
Okay.
The survey also measures research and development for micro businesses, innovation and technology, as well as other interesting business and owner characteristics.
So we stated it's an annual survey. We talked about over 8 million employer establishments in the US. How do you measure these businesses every year?
Yes, that is a great question, Amari. So, attempting to measure that many businesses every year would be a really great undertaking and it would be extremely burdensome. So, we actually select a sample of businesses to represent all employer businesses in the United States. And the ABS is actually conducted on a firm basis rather than on an establishment basis. So, by firm, I just mean businesses consisting of one or more domestic establishments. We select between 300,000 and 850,000 firms each year to respond to the annual business survey. Our collection is mandatory, and any employer business filing select IRS tax forms are eligible to be selected in our sample.
Okay.
Our sample is designed to measure businesses operating in most industries across the US, similar to that of the Economic Census, but it's also designed to capture the business owner demographics.
Okay, so thank you for explaining that a company can be one or more establishments. That's a common question we receive from our data users. Now, I want to make sure that I am following you. On this slide, you mentioned 300,000 employer businesses in the sample every year, but 850,000 employer businesses every 5 years. Why did you change the sample size?
So now you're thinking like a true data user, Amari. We actually get this question often from our users. The larger sample size is needed to provide detailed demographic, industry, and geography data. But as you can imagine, even that can be burdensome to measure every year. So to help reduce that burden, we lower the sample size annually. And even with that smaller sample, the Census Bureau is still able to release meaningful data every year, just at a less detailed level. So, for example, every 5 years, when the sample size is 850,000, we release disaggregated data by race and ethnicity. So, we're able to measure Mexican owned, Cuban owned, or Puerto Rican owned businesses, for example. But when that sample size is smaller, we are limited to releasing aggregated race and ethnicity data like the broader Hispanic owned business category.
So now that you've mentioned Hispanic-owned businesses, can you explain how the ABS determines that a business is Hispanic-owned?
Sure. So collecting the demographics data is really the bread and butter of what the ABS provides. When we survey the sample businesses, we ask them to report up to 4 owners with the largest share in the business. And based on the owners reported, we then ask them to tell us the sex, ethnicity, race, and the veteran status of those owners. We're also asking additional characteristics about the owners reported, such as the age of owner, education level, disability status, or their reason for owning the business, for example. Once all that data are received and analyzed, we then tabulate the data by the business owner demographics reported. The combination of owners having 51% or more of the stock or equity in the business determines how that business is classified by the demographics. And those businesses that cannot be classified are included separately in the publicly held or unclassifiable category.
So that's serious, the way you guys are measuring the demographics of business owners. That's really, really interesting. Earlier, you mentioned other data are collected on the ABS. Can you tell us more about what else is collected other than important owner demographics?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that question because although the demographics is a major component of the ABS, I would be remiss if I did not mention the other valuable data that we collect as part of this survey. In fact, our survey is designed to incorporate new content every single year. And this allows us to measure new relevant topics on a frequent basis to help stay abreast of changes in the economy. The ABS has measured topics such as innovation, technology, financing, and management practices, just to name a few. In fact, our first look release highlights data that we recently collected on financing practices.
Okay, my bad. So yes, back to the first look, which is what we were supposed to be talking about. So can you tell us more about what's included and share any interesting data with us? Are there any data points that you can highlight possibly?
Of course, I'm always excited to share the great data that's coming from the ABS. Some of the interesting data that we recently collected as part of the financing module and released in the first look included, did your business need additional financing? If so, what were the sources of that financing, and how does the business plan to use those additional funds? We also collected data on if the business expected to continue its operations into the next year and whether the business had profits. And what makes this data so unique and so valuable is that we're able to show these by the owner demographics. For example, first look data on business profitability shows that most firms had profits regardless of their race classification. However, we saw that Black-owned businesses reported losses at a higher rate than other minority-owned businesses, as shown in this graphic.
Interesting. So these tables contain a lot of interesting insight that I'm sure many people aren't even aware that the Census Bureau provides. What can we expect in the coming year from the 2023 ABS? And then also too, what milestones or releases are scheduled?
So we still have quite a bit of work to do before we can publish final data from the 2023 ABS. We will continue to process the data and prepare it for publication, and we expect the final data to be ready to release in October of 2024. The final estimates will provide more detailed data than what we released in the first look. It will include detailed race and ethnicity data, detailed industries, as well as detailed geographies, including US, state, MSA, and county. We're also going to update our interactive data visualization tool, which is a really, really cool tool that allows users to compare the share of business ownership across the states. In addition to that, we are planning to release our US exporting firms by demographics data product, which is a supplemental data product that highlights owner demographics for firms that export goods to other countries. This data product will be released in December of 2024. And then finally, we're going to start the next year's survey by opening data collection for the 2024 ABS this summer. So a lot left to do.
A lot left to do, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot of great tools, a lot of great content that I think is going to be coming out that's going to be extremely, extremely useful. So Tristan, I'm going to turn back to you. Is there anything else that you would like to add about the economic census first look and what's to come?
I just wanted to say to everyone listening that I hope this was helpful and that much more information about the economic census, including a complete schedule of our plan releases, is available online at census.gov/economic census.
All right, cool. Thanks, Tristan. We will share that link again at the end of the presentation. And Patrice, I'll ask you the same question. Do you have anything to add for annual business survey program first look?
Sure. One last thing I would like to share is how to get to the first look data and then the final data when it's actually released. All of our data are accessible from the ABS website at www.census.gov/ABS. I also want to highlight that you can access additional business demographics data, including some historical data that we have, and that's available from the Business Ownership Data Hub. That's easily accessible from the business and industry topic on the census.gov homepage. And of course, if anyone ever needs assistance accessing our data, or if you have general questions about the ABS, I've included our contact information here. So please feel free to reach out to the ABS team.
Spectacular. Thank you, Patrice, and thank you, Tristan. I think this has been a very informative tale of two first looks. I think it is safe to say that our attendees have gained a greater understanding of what these two first looks entail and what is to come for both the economic census and the annual business survey program. For more information on these programs and to access first look data, please visit these links on the census.gov site. So at this point, we're going to get ready to start to respond to some of the Q&A portion of the webinar, as I had mentioned earlier in the introduction. As we're waiting, so we've already gotten some questions that have come through in the Q&A session. So we're going to go through some of those and we'll ask our speakers. But one of the things that I want to make everyone aware of, as you are also adding additional questions to the question and answer session, is we wanted to take the opportunity to let you know the importance of hearing your feedback and how much it matters to our outreach and training. We review your feedback. We want to hear what we did well. We want to hear what we could have done better. We want to hear also additional topics we would like to hear. It only takes a few minutes, but it is a big help for what we do here to provide the resources to you. So as soon as the webinar is complete, a questionnaire is going to pop up. As soon as you log off, it takes a couple of minutes. You fill out the evaluation form. Let us know again what you think. And then we'll certainly take that into consideration for future training. So at this point, now we're going to open it up for questions. I've seen some questions that have come through the chat. So what I'm going to do is pass some of these questions along. Also, I wanted to let you know that we also have some additional staff supporting us as they've been answering some questions through the Q&A feature. They're also going to be on the call as well too, as we're answering some of your questions. So what I'm going to do is look through some of the questions and I'm going to share them to some of our speakers. So give me a quick second as I click into the question and answer section. One question I did see come up for Patrice in particular, at what geography level is the annual business survey? Can you speak to the level of detail?
Sure. So the annual business survey usually is at the U.S. state and MSA level. For the 2023 ABS, that's when we had the larger sample size. So we will have additional geographies available at the county and economic place levels. But we are also evaluating if a county level is something that we can publish on an annual basis, even with that smaller sample size. So at minimum, users will get US, state, MSA, and we are looking at county. And then again, in the large sample year, you also get economic place data.
Excellent. Let me try to work through my scroll feature and my Q&A is not working and I'm stuck on one section. Okay, here we go. Okay. So I see one of our colleagues is responding to some of the questions. Let me see. One question that I will answer, someone asked a question about the coin campaign that I mentioned during the presentation. So that wasn't an actual coin that we were releasing from the Census Bureau. It was something that we were posting online. So each state had a particular, for the tail side of the coin, it was a state quarter or something like that. So that's what we were putting up, like, oh, here's a fun fact for New Hampshire. Here's a fun fact for Texas. So that's what I was referring to as the coin campaign. So it wasn't actual coins you can go buy to add to your collection. It was just something that we were doing online. All right. Let me see. So one question, and I'm actually going to pull up something for you as well, Tristan, but I want to share this with Patrice. So we talk about ABS, but this also gives an opportunity to talk about another product we released. The question is, does ABS include non-employee firms? And then you can speak about how we capture non-employees.
That is a really great question. So the ABS is a survey, and we actually do not survey the non-employers as a part of the annual business survey, but we do measure the non-employers by the owner demographics, and we do that solely using administrative records data. So this actually reduces the burden for us having to mail non-employer businesses to collect their demographics. We're using source data that we have from ACS, from the IRS, other census surveys to determine those demographics of the non-employer businesses. So today we focus mostly on the annual business survey, which is employer only, but we just recently released some statistics that combine the results of ABS with those non-employer businesses. That data actually came out last Thursday. And we call that the non-employer statistics by demographics program. And there is a little bit of a lag. So that data covers reference year 2020. But again, we do combine the results from the non-employer piece of the demographics with the annual business survey. So that's a really, really excellent question.
Perfect. Thank you. Tristan, question for you. We mentioned economic place when we're talking about different types of geographies. Can you explain what economic place means?
Yeah, I can try. It's essentially typically we're publishing US level, state level, and when I say have local level statistics, this will include the place level. And, there's a specific, I guess, definition of what place means. But yeah, we'll actually publish data down to that very small geographic level. It's usually kind of around larger metropolitan areas. But yeah, you can usually find most of our basic data is available for those geographic levels. Hope that
Okay,
answers the
thank you.
question.
Thank you. We'll see if somebody follows up with another question. Something else to maybe speak to more broadly. So the question was related to Sector 22 of the NAICS, which I believe is utilities. But the question was talking about any separation between physical stores and online sales. So not necessarily just that particular industry, but how does the Econ Census account for anything that's done online versus things that are brick and mortar? Could you speak to that?
It's a good question. It's a topic that we are constantly trying to study for ourselves, honestly. I would say typically, and it really changes by what sector you're talking about. I guess you were interested in sector 22. But typically, establishments are classified in the um, in the industry in which their primary activity um, is kind of categorized in, whether or not it's done through the internet or not. So I don't cover NAICS Sector 22, so I couldn't get into maybe some of the specifics there.
Hmm.
But considering uh, the economy in 2024, almost every single business you can think of has an online presence. Usually, we are capturing both online and kind of offline activity under the same pot, if you will. It does depend on what sectors you're talking about, but um, yeah, that's, I think, the general answer there.
Also, Tristan, I'll add to that. While this is outside somewhat of the scope of the Econ Census and ABS, we also have an e-commerce report, an e-stats
Yeah.
report that we release that specifically highlights online business. So while it's not for Econ Census, maybe ABS, we also have other data sources that we release that do highlight online purchases and online activity. So hopefully that is a resource that someone could use. Another question that came up that I'll actually answer, and you two feel free to jump in. A question was asked about Econ Census and other business data programs that are not in data.census. So what I would recommend is if you're interested in using data.census for economic programs, one of the ways to see what is covered is if you go into data.census, you go into the advanced search, and then select economic programs as your option of surveys that you're picking from, and it will show you those programs that are there. You will see 2017 Econ Census, you will see the annual business survey, and then it will then pull the information based on possibly the geography you're pulling. So to the question, if you go and you search it that way, you will see what surveys are there. And then comparing that against the other 60 or so releases that we have every year, you will then see what is available in data.census.gov. So that was one question. Okay, let me scroll through to see if I see some other questions. One question that comes up from time to time, does how do you separate establishments and firms? Or can you explain again the difference between, so Patrice, this may be a question for you more broadly, just the explanation between establishments and firms.
Sure. So they can be one and the same, but generally some businesses have more than one location. And so it would be the combination of those locations that we cover in our survey. So we're asking businesses their data for the entire firm, not just a particular location, which I think is what the economic census focuses on.
Okay, good. One question that I will address, we saw a question in reference to profit and not for profit. One of the things that is interesting that we see again outside of economic census and annual business survey is nonprofit is not a industry, it is a tax designation. So a lot of times people will say, oh, the nonprofit industry, but we don't define it as an industry because it is a tax designation, because you will have multiple types of industries that have nonprofit designation. So just to make that distinction between nonprofit and for-profit is that's a tax designation. It's not an actual industry. So if someone were to say, well, show me the data on the nonprofit industry, that's going to tie across a whole bunch of different industries and sectors. So that's one thing that I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned.
Can I just add to that, Omari?
Absolutely.
So,
Yes, please.
as part of the annual business survey, we have traditionally always included nonprofits in our scope. We have not always surveyed those businesses because generally there probably is not one owner that owns 10% or more of a nonprofit. But in collaboration with our survey sponsor, we do actually survey nonprofits now to collect their R&D. So that is something that is accessible from the annual business survey now.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me take a look at one other thing. I think we're coming down. So there was one question that I was trying to look at quickly. There was a question of, is county business patterns, does census still publish results from county business patterns annual survey, or has ABS taken the place of county business pattern? We can see by Patrice's face. Patrice, that's your question. It looks like that's a no.
No, the county business patterns is a really, really great data set. And we actually utilize some of the information that they capture as part of the annual business survey. So we certainly do not replace that program. We are just a supplement to it, if you will, so to speak, because we're adding on those demographics. But there's still a lot of helpful and resourceful information coming from the county business patterns every year.
And I will add a second point to that, especially from a data user perspective. County business patterns is a big anchor for one of our tools called Census Business Builder, where again, if you are a roofing contractor, if you are a waste disposal, and you want to find out how many other businesses or establishments that are like that in my own county, we're pulling that information from county business patterns. So that one is a tool. So to supplement what Patrice just answered with, not only is it still used, it is still very useful, because again, when people are submitting business loans or a bank loan, a lot of times the first question the bank is going to ask you is, well, how many other businesses like you already exist in your particular county, for you to get a sense of where you are in the market. So all right, let me see if we have any other questions. One of the things I also want to mention too is our information is available, so you can always feel free to contact us if there was a question that we did not address. So we want to make sure that that information is available as well. So back to that question, so are nonprofits included in the sampling? Yes, because we don't define them as nonprofits. We define them as a manufacturing entity, as a services entity. We don't then define them as a nonprofit. So we actually have another annual survey, the statistics of U.S. businesses, that does provide that breakdown on nonprofit and tax designation. So that might be something you might want to take a look at. So Econ Census will be something that will be in data.census.gov. As I mentioned, I'm actually pulled up data.census.gov right now. And the old, well, I will say the existing 2017 Econ Census is available in data.census.gov right now. To Tristan's point, as we start releasing data, it will then be added into that data set as data will be released, as Tristan mentioned, our different release schedules. So at this point, I'd like to thank our presenters, and on the slide is our contact information and website. I believe on the next slide, so not only those are the websites, but on the next slide has our email, has our general email at the bottom. So if you have questions about some of the things that we may have discussed, feel free to email us at ewd.outreach@census.gov. If there were any other questions that maybe we weren't able to address today, that you would like to share with us, we again pass the information around. If it's a question for Patrice, we'll reach out to Patrice. If it's a question for Tristan, we'll talk to Tristan. So If any other questions, please make sure that you feel free to send us those emails if you have any questions, or also feel free to give us a call as well too. Patrice, Tristan, I would like to thank you all for your time. I'd like to thank you, everyone listening to today's webinar, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.